Welcome back everyone, this is Joe. We are here in our DSVB Power BI 2 worksheet. Today I want to show you the summarize function and the TOPN function to do what would probably be a little bit of an obscure ask, but I wouldn't show you it if I hadn't come across this before. So if you haven't been following along, you will not have this worksheet, but I encourage you to go back to the beginning of the Power BI playlist or just try and follow along here. But if you have been following along, go ahead and open this up here. Picking up right where we left off, I'm going to focus our attention here on the first column, so just average for selected year. This is life expectancy by entity, so pretty simple grouping going on here. But let's just say you can sort here, right? So let's just say we wanted to do whatever our top entity is for average life expectancy, which in this case is the United Kingdom at 42.26. That's for whatever year we have selected here, so let's actually also only select 2016 for now. So now it is, if we sort 83.94 for Japan, and then it's 68.55 for India, which is our lowest one. So say we just wanted to have a simple subtraction, like what is the range, right, between our top one and our bottom one. It's a pretty tricky ask, and if you've ever heard anyone talk about the 3 dimensions of Power BI, you know, Guy in a Cube, their YouTube channel is great, by the way. They call it Guy in a Cube, so I encourage you to check that out. And I assume that's why they call it Guy in a Cube, just because we live in 3 dimensions sometimes in Power BI. You can't really easily write a measure or even display it cleanly on this visual, where it will just dynamically grab whatever the top entity is for that year and then subtract the bottom one here. So let's go ahead and put it on a card, and I'll show you how to do this. Essentially, we have to recreate the visual in a measure and then do the subtraction. And we'll let the year just filter everything for us, so we don't really have to worry about that. So I'm going to resize this a bit. I'm going to resize this over here to the right. And then I'm going to put a card on the screen. So that is this visual here, card. Although make sure you're selected off of this, which I was not. So I'm going to hit undo, click this empty space here, click on the card again, and now we're just going to drag our measure into here, and it will display whatever the output of the measure is, which should just be one thing. But let's go ahead and put a title on our card so we all know what we're trying to do here. So if we select the card, I might actually have to put something in here first. Yeah, we do. And then we can turn the title on. I just put something random in there for now. And then we'll call it max life expectancy minus min life expectancy. And just to be descriptive, I'm going to write from visual above. And here you can center it, do whatever you like, make it blue. And I'm going to take this off. Our title will come back. And now I'm going to write the measure from scratch. So right click, do new measure. And let's just call this exactly what we called it. Let's do life expectancy range actually. Life, I'll do underscores. And I'll call it dynamic range, why not? Because it's always going to do it based on whatever year you select and the top and bottom entities. So we haven't talked about this yet, but I want to introduce variables. So we can write variables and then reference them later. So I first need to basically recreate this table, right? Because if I just do a max of the life expectancy table, it's going to look in that year, yes, but it's going to look across all entities. So I need to group everything by entity. So this kind of just goes back to what I would call a pivot table. So let's just call this group by entity, or average by entity, average life expectancy by entity, whatever you want to call it. You can't have spaces here in variables, so we're saying variable, we're defining the variable as this, and now we're going to call it equals. And then I'm going to introduce this summarized function here, and then it gives you a little snippet here of what we want. So the table, we'll do this at the lowest level, so downstream as possible, since we can do everything inside of the life expectancy table here. Going to tab to click the table, So this is the table we're going to use to group by, and we're going to group by entity, right? So we're basically just recreating this. So let's group by entity, and now I can create my own column. I can group by another column if I want, but we have nothing left to group by. Everything to the right of entity, it's all numbers. So let's go to the next one. We don't need to group by something, so let's name this next column, and I'm just going to call it average. And I can write average life expectancy to fill in what is this now, the average column, or I can just reference that measure that we've already written. It's average life expectancy, which is simply the average of the life expectancy column, and the year will do the filtering for us. So that's variable number 1. Close that out, closes the summarize, and now we can go to variable number 2. So we'll call this top 1. We want the top 1 of this table, so we can use the TOPN function. We want 1, the top value of the table we just created, average life expectancy by entity, and then we want to order by the average column that we created, but make sure it's this one, right? It will appear in brackets and it'll have this little table. At this point, if you see this here, you know that we're referencing what we just created up here. If you called it something else, you would see it here, and it would look like this. It wouldn't have a table name or anything in front of it. And then we want to order by 1, right? So that I'm just going to close this now, and then I'm going to do a return. We're not done yet, but I want to just display this. So if we return, and then we can't just return the top 1 because this actually generates a full table, so that wouldn't give you one result. So sum x is a way. We need these x functions to go 3-dimensional. That's what I like to say. I think the x functions are more 3-dimensional because it allows you to go row by row from a table and then do some type of expression. So we'll reference this second table that we created, so the top 1. And now we're taking this table and we want the average column. So click enter here. Now we're going to drag this onto the card. And we see 68.55. That is, if I sort, and my year filter's a little in the way, so I'll raise that up. It's actually giving us the bottom one right now. So that was not intended. We could do the top one by changing this 1 here to descending, or we can change it to ascending. I don't know why I had a 1 there. Apparently it works if you have numbers, but if I do ascending, it'll stay the same, right? I'll click enter. It's going to go from least all the way to the greatest, so that'll give you 68.55. And if I do descending, then it'll take the top 1 if the table is ordered from greatest to least, and then I should get that 83.94. So we've done the first part of this. We got the top 1 when it's descending. So we also now need to do the bottom one. So we can just add another variable and call it bottom 1, and we can basically just take this here, copy it down, and then do the ascending version. And now we can just subtract them, right? So we do take this, paste it there, and then we could do the bottom one, and then we can reference the average again. I don't know why it's gray. I think this should work. Let's just click enter and verify. And it looks like it is giving us a range now, so 15.39. If we take out our calculate here, we can pretty much verify this. So the 68.55, and then minus the 83.94. I did this backwards, but negative 15.39, here's your 15.39. So we know that this works. So recreating our visual in the first variable, getting the top row in the second variable, getting the bottom row in the third variable, and then in the return result, we're just subtracting the top minus the bottom. So basically, right, making a pivot table, group by entity in one of the variables, returning a table of rows, but it's just one row. We could do multiple rows, but we did one row for the top minus the bottom. We get you 15.39, and we're letting the year do all of the filtering for us, so we can select one, we can select multiple. This is what makes it dynamic. So as you can see, I'm just selecting them, and it's just changing here on the fly. So that's really nice there. So if we look at the measure one more time here, go into life expectancy dynamic range. I already explained what the variables are doing. We're taking the difference here to get the result. We're doing sum x. I'm not sure I explained this perfectly, so we're taking the top one table. It might be more clear if I called this a table with just one row. And then we have to change it here. So top one table and then bottom one table. And then the sum x is going row by row in this top one table, which is just one row, and then taking what is the one result in your average column. If you had multiple results, like 2 or 3 rows, then the sum would be summing up those 3 rows for your average column. But we're just doing the one. So in theory, you can use any x function here, any function that goes row by row, and I'm just going to leave it max x. You can use average x. It doesn't necessarily matter. If I change these to 2, then it would matter, because then you're getting the top 2 and the bottom 2 rows. So then you actually need to figure out what you want to do with that average column. We probably wouldn't call it average if we didn't want the average, although if we did have the average and we wanted to sum it up, you know, we can definitely do that, or just take the max of the average column. But we're just making sure that we get the top and bottom row, and then since we're only getting one result, we can just use whatever x function we want. So comment it here too, just so take max of created table average column minus created table minus the minimum of created table average column. The 2 ticks will get you a comment, or you can also do, and I'm doing shift enter to change rows, by the way, you can also do the / and star, and then you just have to write your comment and close it out the same way. That allows you to do multiple rows like so. But I'll take that out, click enter, and I hope this was a good one for you. I know this is a little tricky, a little weird, but could come up, and you might have just an instance where you want to display this on a card where it doesn't make sense to actually put it on the visual, and there's no clean way to just take the top minus the bottom, and we want it to change dynamically, right? Because if you select a certain year, it might not always be Japan on the top and India on the bottom. It can change year by year, so we don't want to explicitly write those entities in a measure. We want to avoid doing that, so this way is definitely the best way to do a dynamic range if you come across this. So again, hope this helped. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.